a person who worked with ID 2020 is now speaking out. This article is from CoinDesk. Decentralized ID at all costs. Advisor quits ID 2020 over blockchain fixation. This title is, I think, intentionally manipulative. This is a double-edged sword in this article. She's very clearly calling out the things that we're talking about. This is dangerous. The techno-solutionism, she calls it. The technocracy. The idea that they're driving towards this push for digital currency even and immunity passports, which that are by far beneficial to them. And in fact, are actually worse for us, but they don't even care. They're selling it to us as a helpful thing. That's what she's claiming. But then also, the article seems to, in a very weird and almost, I would argue, disjointed way, disparage the idea of decentralization and blockchain technology, which I know there are people out there that have become convinced that it's the end of the world. This is the new world order, blah. That you're talking about Bitcoin is very different than that's not the wrong word. That's the wrong word I'm looking for. Anyway, a technology that can be applied. Like the internet. The internet, I argue, was created by DARPA, and it was created, and I argue, in a way to control. But that didn't work out for them, did it? Because we used it in a way to benefit. Blockchain technology can do amazing things. I argue it could literally change the way our government functions and keep them accountable if we used, blockchain ledgers for everyone. Imagine if you could at any moment access the spending for the Pentagon. And look at, if we had blockchain ledgers keeping track of their spending, and imagine if at any moment in time you could just check up and look and see what they're spending it on. They'll never do that, you see, because they need to have black, ops and things behind the scene that you can't see. $20 trillion, unaccounted for. That's what they want. But I argue this article is in a weird way disparaging that, and I think that's intentional. I think they're desperately afraid of what blockchain and decentralization could do. A decentralized internet as well, they're terrified of that. But you'll see what I mean as we go through this. Now, an advisor to the ID 2020 Alliance, which aims to bring digital identities to billions of people. That's a very kind and deceiving way to put it. What it is it's an ID. You get a physical card. So it's not just a digital ID. It's your ID with a tracking chip in it that is a national ID that they have also now tied to the idea of immunity passports. So you won't be allowed to have an ID for anything, to be able to fly, travel, any other thing you made an ID for. Go into a bar, unless you have your vaccinations and you can prove it. That's real, and it's already happening. Right? We're not going to force you to do it, but you can't live your life without it, so go ahead and do it. Right? That's what it is. In her resignation email Friday, Elizabeth, I forgot to look this up. Reneris, I'm just going to call her Elizabeth. Elizabeth, the defector from the ID 2020 group, she cited the ID 2020's opacity, quote, techno-solutionism. How spot on. And corporate influence along with the risks of applying blockchain to immunity passes. So, I'm with her right up this whole thing. The idea is that these don't need to be blended together. We don't even need immunity passports. That should be off the table. Blockchain should, though, be broadly applied to all things government so that we can all keep them accountable. Right? Because that's what that means. Is blockchain technology is something that is open. People can access it and see it. At the stage, it says, I no longer even describe what ID 2020, at this stage, I can no longer even describe what ID 2020's mission is with any confidence. Think about that. This is a person who is working on this project this whole time, and now she doesn't even, they've lost the plot. Or rather, she's realized they never really meant to do what they said they meant to do. She was one of 6 members of the ID 2020's Technical Advisory Committee. She says, all I can perceive is a desire to promote decentralized identity solutions at all costs. Now, that seems very strange to me. Once we get into the part, you'll see what I mean once we get into the immunity passports, which is what this is really about. But to push this into it's a bad thing that we should want decentralized solutions, I don't know. This felt just interestingly weird to me. But Elizabeth, a fellow at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, which I find interesting, and an expert in cross-border data protection and privacy issues, she was previously in-house counsel at 2 digital identity startups. Her concerns about the technology, which highlight the trade-offs between health and privacy during the pandemic, are spelled out in her white paper, which we'll look at next. She says the introduction of immunity passes could interfere with people's privacy. Well, you don't say. And their freedom of association, their assembly and movement. Blockchain-enabled immunity certificates, or immunity passports for COVID-19, if implemented by public authorities, would have serious consequences for our fundamental human rights and civil liberties, she writes. That is a person from the inside, guys. Think about that. But again, I argue these things aren't mutually exclusive. Like blockchain-enabled, like immunity certificates using any technology they have right now, not even necessarily blockchain-based, are just as alarming. It's the immunity passport part of that makes it alarming, not the blockchain part. But yeah, that's my opinion. I'm sure there are people that disagree with that, but I don't get the forceful tie-in there with these two things. Because it's the idea that they're tracking you that's the most concerning, right? If it's decentralized, why would it be as concerning if you could at any point in time look at what they're doing? That doesn't sound as nefarious to me if it's public knowledge and it's always accessible. Right? I mean, that's the point of decentralization. I don't know. Anyway, it says the discord within ID 2020 hints at larger debates around where to use distributed ledger technology, which is kind of what we're talking about, and where it may create more problems than it solves. But when it comes to immunity passports, the stakes seem higher. Now, this is what I'm sure you'll be interested in. Elizabeth worries about how the influence of corporations like Microsoft may influence the development of these systems. Kim Cameron, architect of identity at Microsoft, actually sits on ID 2020's board right now. And Kim Gagne, newly appointed as board chair, also worked at Microsoft. Right, Microsoft. I mean, Bill Gates, right? I mean, clear, obvious tie here. They sit on the board. Let's not pretend like this is not an obvious crossover. This is a very clear drive. It says, quote, who is doing the building here is a critical vulnerability, as critical as any technical challenge. This is 100% a hammer looking for a nail. That is very apt. The whole analogy, right? If every problem looks like how's it go, right? If all you got is a hammer, then every problem starts to look like a nail, right? That's all we are, is a big hammer. But let's go through her actual discussion here. The dangers of blockchain-enabled immunity passports. The legal perspective. It says, despite limited backing from civil society or public health experts, as well as warnings from historians and bioethicists, technologists are racing. It's interesting, right? It's like a gospel today. These technocrats are racing ahead to build and deploy digital certificates that would allegedly let individuals prove whether they have recovered from the novel coronavirus disease, have tested positive for antibodies, or have received a vaccination, should one become available. One such initiative is based on a combination of an emerging W3C standard for verifiable credentials, non-standard decentralized identifiers, and distributed ledger technology, or blockchain. In this article, we examine why such proposed technology interventions lack sufficient supporting scientific and public health evidence. I mean, guys, think about that. Even this, in her mind, lacks scientific evidence, let alone everything else. The lockdowns, the masks, all this stuff. There's not scientific evidence that supports what they're telling you. As a result, we believe such interventions, if adopted or implemented by public authorities, would pose an unjustified interference with and serious threat to our fundamental human rights and civil liberties, in violation of the principle of legality, necessity, and proportionality. Very well put. Now, I want to quickly go over just the three things in the first part that she says here, the legal perspective. She says blockchain enabled, again, I argue just the idea, just the immunity certificates. That's the part, right? Immunity certificates or immunity passports, however they were used or made, and whatever technology they use for COVID-19, that's my take on it, if implemented by public authorities, would have serious consequences for our fundamental human rights and civil liberties. The introduction of these artifacts could interfere with our right to privacy, freedom of association, assembly, and movement, our right to work and education, and otherwise seriously limit our freedom and autonomy, even where not compulsory. That's important, compulsory. That's the main point. Even if they're not forcing it on you, if you can't live your life how you had before, you're going to end up doing, most people will. I'm never going to take part in this. I mean, we just have to see how clearly this is being pushed. Even if you think it's what's right, you can't create a scenario where people are obligated, even by necessity. I mean, you just can't do that. It says, for example, while not expressly mandated by law, individuals in post-lockdown China must be able to produce a, quote, green QR code of health status on their mobile device. It's exactly what our government's putting together right now in order to access public transportation, enter workplaces or residences, and more, and have virtually no way of challenging the automated determinations of status. Remember the video I showed you where the lady was face scanning her biometrics to get inside of her own apartment building? Right? If that thing tells you you're sick, you can't get in your own house. Who wants to live in a world like that? It doesn't make any sense. Now, there's a lot more in here that you should read. Makes excellent points. Goes on the idea that, what should have been done by our government that they haven't been doing. The next one is a public health perspective. There are at least 3 reasons why, from a public health perspective, immunity passports are an unwise option to pursue. It's a very kind way to put that. Number 1, current SARS-CoV-19 antibody tests are highly unreliable. We all know this. And the immune response to COVID-19 is poorly understood. Exactly. They'll tell on one side of their mouth, they'll tell you that we don't know enough about this. And the other side of the mouth, they'll tell you that we need to use that lack of information to make a very dangerous and untested vaccine. Totally makes sense. A COVID-19 vaccine is a long way off, and while some have suggested that the international certificate of vaccination for yellow fever serves as an example, basically that it's just not even close to the same thing. But the point is, antibody tests are highly unreliable, right? We're basing our justification and our actions on things that have been shown to be faulty. And the next one, a technical perspective. COVID-19 immunity passports based on a combination of verifiable credentials, decentralized identifiers, and blockchain would be an excessive and disproportionate technical means of achieving any limited public health outcomes. The technical architecture is arguably a product of premature standardization, speculative requirements, and highly experimental technologies. Thank you. Rather than the harmonizing of existing, widely deployed, and battle-tested solutions. As a result, there is simply reason to question whether they are adequate to support credentials that would play a crucial role in public safety. Yes, they don't care. At the very least, they're willing to acknowledge that there are obvious risks to you to roll out what they want to roll out. That's what that means. I mean, I really do hope this is more than anything, I hope you'll read this in its entirety. On top of all of that, guys, we're crazy, right? We're crazy. Because this person who worked with the literal ID 2020 group is now coming out and confirming all of our worst fears. But we're also crazy because they're not installing 5G around the country right now under COVID-19, right? Because my video was censored that said that. They told me that was fake news. Even the fact checker said that's just not real. Well, here's a new House bill pushing the Pentagon to boost 5G security and increasingly putting 5G, and this is in regard to the actions against other countries and the implementation in this country right now. So while this is all happening, your own Congress is also pushing bills about 5G while telling you you're a conspiracy theorist for pretending that they're trying to implement 5G, right? Totally lines up. A bipartisan pair of lawmakers introduced legislation on June 18th that would direct the Department of Defense to implement several measures to improve 5G security. They argue it's already being implemented in 7 locations around the country. But they introduced the DoD 5G Act, which would direct the Pentagon. This is a different one, right? This is different than Donald Trump's executive order. They would direct the Pentagon to take several measures to identify and immediately remediate known vulnerabilities in the department's telecommunications infrastructure. So again, this is 5G is not a military technology. Of course not. But when the military is going to make it, it's technology. They're going to use it. But this started as something that stemmed from the military. as the U.S. continues to invest in disruptive new technologies such as 5G, think about that. It is critical the Department of Defense identify risks and vulnerabilities in its telecommunications infrastructure. The DoD 5G Act ensures the DoD assesses and mitigates these risks as the department moves forward with implementation of 5G technology. Right, so it's happening. No matter what, it's happening right now. And recognize it says, as the U.S. continues to invest in disruptive new technologies, disruptive, right? I don't know if you can see the definition that pops up. Causing or tending to cause disruption, troublesome, unruly, badly behaved, disorderly. That's what they're calling 5G. A disruptive new technology, right? Because it can be used like that. It can be used as crowd control. It can be used to make people's skin burn. It can be used as an attack weapon. But let's pretend like that won't be happening to you, as those boxes will be on every 20 feet all around everywhere around the country. All they got to do is turn them up. Right? For the people who are going, oh, he's so crazy. It's very, very real. I've talked about it on the show. The technology and the data is all there for you to see if you just care to look at it. But if you're, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist, he'll never look into it, right? Those people shaking their head, they're already gone because they've chosen to believe somebody instead of thinking for themselves. But interestingly enough, the DoD 5G Act would direct the launch of the Defense Secretary-led telecommunications security program. The whole thing is about implementing this now. And recognize, well, here's the actual bill itself, by the way. Listen to what it says. To direct the Secretary of Defense, ESPER, to carry out activities to develop, secure, and effectively implement. So but implement 5G technology. Program, the Secretary of Defense shall carry out a program to identify and mitigate vulnerabilities in the telecommunications infrastructure, right? Because they're right now trying to, attack China and whoever else so they can be the leaders, right? Because that's we shouldn't be pretending that's not happening, right? This is just straight up money and control and corporatocracy. They're trying to attack anyone else. Same with pipelines and anything else. They want to be the ones. They want to be the ones winning and succeeding and making the money. So they're going to attack even their allies that are maybe getting a better deal than they will. In this case, 5G, China's leading the way, and they can't have that. In carrying out the program, and this is one thing you'll notice as we go through this, notice what this is not talking about. We're going to rush this out in 30 days, make this happen, but there's not a single mention of safety in this entire bill. Not one. Conduct independent red team security analysis, right? So are we going to be secure? Are we able to protect ourselves? Are we able to use this to attack? Can we fight, can we use it? That's what it's all about. Verify the integrity of personnel who are tasked with those tasks. Verify the efficacy of the physical security measures. Direct the chief information officer at the Department of Defense at the Federal Risk Authorization Management Program to moderate high clouds. It's all about security and technology. Direct the Defense Information Systems Agency, a capability for continuous independent monitoring of packet streams for 5G data, right? So monitoring the data going through 5G, right? None of these things say anything about safety, right? The safety that we know we don't have, right? The safety that is not there, that has never been tested for. I mean, I don't know how many times that we can bring this up, right? I mean, the idea that they know that there has not been any testing. They know that, but they just don't care. And not only then are they going to force it in now quickly without that testing.
How much money has the industry committed to supporting additional independent research? And we're talking about research on the biological effects of this new technology.
There are no industry-backed studies to my knowledge right now.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effect?
Well, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I've heard that a few times. Doesn't get old though, right? No one even answers. Just there. So we're just flying blind here. Oh yeah, okay, no big deal. Moving forward, right? Right, here's the new bill. Trump already signed an executive order, so you know he's on board for 5G, which I know a lot of his supporters don't agree with, but there's probably some 5D chess narrative that makes that make sense somehow. You know, there's some secret thing fighting the deep state in Iran using 5G, and it's going to go away when it's all over. You know, just there's some fallacy, some adult fairy tale that makes it all make sense. Because the alternative is that just Trump supports 5G and supports vaccines and supports the things that they pretend they don't want him to support. That's what's happening, though, right? So you can stick your head in the sand, or you can realize that it's happening, that he's part of it. They're supporting these things, driving this forward. Here's a bill to literally into this. And the point is, at the end here, we're talking about a plan. Not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the Secretary of Defense shall submit to Congress a plan for the implementation of the program. No testing. Oh, and don't forget that we already have a Secure 5G and Beyond Act of 2020, right? Bipartisan, just like it was. This was introduced. Guess when? A long time ago. Right? So this is not new, but it's happening now. All while we ask yourself, if we're really in this situation, they keep telling us it's so dire and we're so serious, and we might even do another lockdown. Like, you know, I want people to think about, if we end up doing a lockdown and Trump goes along with it, that needs to be a breaking point. But while they're telling us this is so dire and it's so serious, but yet they're secretly passing bills about Israel and passing bills about 5G, that's what's important to them, their foreign policy, their agendas, while they pull everything they can away from you.